Hello and welcome to the last part of this edition of RAD TV UK, where we will hear from Clive Menzies about a new move in Washington to break the power of the banking cartel. But first, here is a news item. The London offices of Shell and BP were raided by EU investigators last month on a price-fixing probe that, if proven, could have cost consumers billions of pounds. A whistleblower at Shell has claimed regular, super-secret meetings with BP were held and it was, quotes, common knowledge they were talking about prices. This last bit of news went all over the media, but has nearly vanished without trace. 2 US senators act to end the implicit subsidies enjoyed by global banks regarded as too big to fail. Clive, you may have a rare piece of good news tonight from Washington.
The collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008 led to an $800 billion bailout of the US banking system under the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP for short, plus another $182 billion for AIG. Between 2007 and 2010, the Federal Reserve created $16 trillion and gave it to domestic and international banks. In the UK, RBS and Lloyds were bailed out by the government and the Bank of England. People have been fretting over bailing out the banks ever since, but in the UK, the Vickers report shied away from breaking up the banks. The recent Independent Commission on Banking has been more robust, but we've yet to see their recommendations due in June. Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, challenged George Osborne. You continue to defend the idea of a small group of absolutely colossal banks. Is that lack of will to break them up not simply a recipe for a repetition of disasters? In the US, 2 senators have put forward a bill to end too big to fail. According to the Washington Post, the Senate voted 99-0 for the measure. A test of who controls politics in America is about to unfold. The Independent Community of Bankers of America, which has more than 5,000 members, with more than $2 trillion in deposits and assets, is firmly behind the bill. Meanwhile, the major banks fund both the Republicans and Democrats and Obama, so when it goes to the House of Representatives, will it be a case of he who pays the piper?
So Clive, what is this bill exactly proposing? The too big to fail bill or something?
It's proposing a number of measures which include, it's all banks over 500 billion in assets and they have to hold 15% capital. It's no longer going to rely on credit rating agencies, which was one of the problems in the last crisis. Right. It's going to remove all the off-balance sheet items and add them into the pot, so they will have to put out capital in respect of off-balance sheet, as well as
which is how they do it. That's quite often how these scams are done, is with off-balance sheet manipulations. That would be really that would really hit them.
Indeed, and they've also got to put their derivatives exposure, which will be colossal. So they're going to have to hold a lot more capital, and you can imagine that's going to be quite a big deal for them.
And they'll respond by reducing their derivatives speculation and their off-balance sheet activities. So what other way are the banks subsidised?
Well, as we saw with the bailouts, the fact that they can borrow money cheaply because they are effectively guaranteed, it means they're paying a lot less for their money than anybody else, so they have an unfair advantage. In addition, all the money that was created by the Fed and the Bank of England and fed into the banking system, they've virtually got this money for nothing, and then they invest it in assets, all of which have gone up in value. So Wall Street has hit a record high recently, as has the FTSE, and in Japan, which has risen 40% since last autumn, the new government of Shinzo Abe, is conducting something called Abenomics, and that involves just pumping loads of money in, and that sent the stock market up 40%. So it's not curing any economic problems, but it's certainly benefiting the banking system and banks specifically.
So they're pumping up another bubble on the stock market?
Exactly.
Oh dear. You'd think they don't, but this new bill could puncture the bubble, or
Well, if they have to hold 15% of all their exposure, of all their risk assets, so that's derivatives, off-balance sheet items, as well as all their loans, then it's going to mean that they can be far less speculative. Whether it will ever happen is another matter.
So you say that 5,000 banks, smaller banks, are for the bill, and who's against it?
Well, the banks that would be caught by this have more than 500 billion assets, and their balance sheet is greater than 500 billion. So that'll be JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America.
Right, okay, and they're not going to be too happy about this.
Well, you can imagine that having to hold, if they're holding currently 3%, and these are big amounts of money, so they're going to have to raise their capital fivefold.
Or cut out their activities.
But remember that what they hold at the moment is only in respect of what's on their balance sheet at the moment.
Yeah.
Once you add in the off-balance sheet items and all the derivatives, then their balance sheet is going to be much bigger. So they are going to squeal. But it's worth remembering that back in the 60s, typically banks, in this country at least, held 35% reserves.
Wow. Well, thanks very much, Clive.
Pleasure.
And now, to round off this edition of RAD TV UK, here are a couple more bits of news. And as this is a good news section, they're quite good news. A simple vitamin cocktail, highly effective against Alzheimer's. A new piece of research confirms that a simple vitamin cocktail can drastically slow down the disease in its early stages. Quotes, "It's a big effect, much bigger than we would have dreamt of," close quotes, said David Smith of Oxford University, Professor of Pharmacology. A new app could help you identify the dodgy products from their barcode. The Bailout app scans barcodes and then traces products to their parent companies and warns you if they're a setup that you do not want to do business with. If you prefer locally sourced food, Bailout will confirm from the barcode where it originates. Well, that's it for this edition. Thank you for watching RAD TV, and if you liked it, just tell your friends to check us out on the YouTube channel by searching on YouTube for RAD TV UK.